Today, we're going to discuss the affordability issues that the average American is dealing with and how that is affecting the economy. And we're also going to discuss how Trump wants to get the real estate market moving again and some ideas that his administration has.
Yeah, there's a lot on his plate. I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see how he tackles this affordability issue. We're seeing it every day.
Yeah, let's first get into the affordability. And for those watching on YouTube, Ken is looking a little gray because
My lighting.
his lighting. So those that want to comment that he doesn't look well.
Let's go.
Anyways, so since 2019, wages are up about 50%, but housing is up 40%, groceries are up 30%, childcare is up 40%, and healthcare is up 30%.
Yeah.
So all of that, and auto insurance is up 50%. So between all of that, obviously people have less money, less expendable money to spend on necessities.
And people feel it, like they're treading water.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just basic things, right? And when people start to cut things out, like, where they're actually looking at what they're spending and they're saying, okay, I'm not going to go to the movie, or I'm going to cut out some of my subscriptions, or maybe I can reduce my gym membership, or whatever, and just go for hikes, or like that's happening right now. People are pulling back.
Well, and the problem is a lot of this stuff is things that you can't get around spending money on, right? Like you have to have a place to stay. You have to buy groceries. If you have children and you work, you need childcare. So all of these things are really coming down to the inflation is not on stuff that is expendable. It's on stuff that it's people's basic needs, and people that were living paycheck to paycheck before aren't making it, and they're struggling. And we're seeing that in like the car repo numbers. We're seeing that now starting in foreclosures. But also people that had a little padding, your average middle class person is now more paycheck to paycheck. And that is a very scary place to be for the economy and for just your average person.
Right. I think it's interesting. Trump has been blaming the past administration for all this. And by the way, it just all runs together for me, but he's over a year now, so at some point, almost, right. So he's gonna run out of runway here, but I think right now this year there's more. It seems like there's more people that are actually starting to make critical decisions on downgrading where they're living, or certainly the defaults are up, credit card defaults are up, auto foreclosures are up, and we're starting to see it start to tick up on the single family housing now. Now, not huge numbers, but regardless, the things feel different, and I do think it's because of the cash problem. If you take a look at savings rates, they're way down, right? In fact, they were way up, obviously, after the stimmy checks. And by the way, you can check this out on Fred at the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, and it'll show you. It'll just show you. Just type in, what are the personal savings rates, and you'll see how bad it is right now. And I think that's it. I think people ran out of a cushion. The other thing is, there's a lot of interesting jobs, call it side hustles, that aren't necessarily side hustles anymore. Like Uber is another one, let's talk about Uber, and now they've got Waymo. I know that's just in Phoenix, but that's coming, guys, right?
Waymo, for those that don't know, are the self-driving Ubers.
The self-driving cars. They're everywhere. They're actually going on the freeways this month, and they've been testing around Phoenix. They're everywhere. And I've talked to plenty of Uber folks around that, but they're going to start getting into food delivery and obviously people delivery, and there's all these things. That's just one thing. And I just think that the other thing is, I'm talking to people around AI. Like I'm talking to folks like attorneys, for example. And I had a couple of attorneys said, there's really very little need for paralegals. Like paralegals are a bit on the chopping block right now because of ChatGPT and some of the things that they can do. So these little things are creeping in now, and I don't think that people have the cash and that second, third, fourth potential revenue stream like we should have. I don't think they have it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think a lot of people are, the job market is getting softer, and it's getting harder for people to find work. And, it's interesting because consumer spending is still up, right? So you have to look at, because we do have this K-shaped economy. And we look at the K-shaped economy, but boomers have more money now than any other generation that has retired, right? Like they have multiple
Let's
houses.
explain what K-shape means, right?
Okay.
Because K-shape means that there's a sector of the economy that's going like this, and there's a sector of economy that's going like that, like a K. I think that's important to understand.
And those that have, so a lot of your boomers are on the higher end of that. So they're fine. They have their pensions, some of them, you have your Social Security, you have maybe rental property, you did really well in the stock market. So they're accounting for a lot of this consumer spending. And that is going to keep going in that regard because they have the money, this generation. But then you have, your Gen Zers, your millennials, and they're kind of on the bottom end of that, depending a lot on, when they bought their house is a big one. But even the people that bought their house early, you're still dealing with increased grocery prices, job losses, wage stagnation, all of that. So you can have consumer spending and still have a big problem in the economy. And I think that is where that consumer spending is coming from. Kick off the new year with clarity and confidence. The holidays are in full swing, and it's the perfect time to get ahead of the 2026 real estate market. Ken and I are giving our community exclusive holiday pricing on Ken Pro. This product offers premium market insight, tools, and strategies. It is only available through the link below and for a limited time. Start 2026 smarter and more prepared. Tap the link in the description to take advantage of this special offer.
Yeah, to me, it boils down to whether if you have the money to invest and you're in some kind of hard asset or even the stock market for that matter, you feel like you're at least moving, right? And if you're not, if you're just paying your car payment and you're just paying your rent and you're just paying your food and you're stressing out because maybe you're not working as much or maybe you are, either way there's stress. And I think those are the folks, and that's a big number of people.
Well, and that's why Mamdani won in New York, right? Because he's offering, he's proposing free daycare and free busing and all these free things that people need help with.
Yeah.
But at the same time, now Kathy Hochul, the governor's coming out and saying we can't fund anything he promised, so we can't do it. But I do think that there's sentiment there that...
Well, you got to understand why he won. The issue is, why did he win?
Right.
And that's actually the biggest issue. And the reason is because of this affordability issue.
Yeah.
People are feeling squeezed. They're not happy. They're pissed. I also think the pandemic made a lot of people pretty soft.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just went home and... and some of them don't ever want to go back to the office. They just always want to work remote. And some of them are vagabonds, with little side hustles and stuff, doing things. And so there's a lot of people that kind of unplugged. The participation rate in the workforce is way down too.
It is. And I think that, Gen Z is in for a little bit of a wake up call now that, the job market's tightening, because before they could be extremely picky on the hours they wanted to work and if they wanted to work remote and what they wanted to do. But now, with the tight job market comes, you have to take the job that you can get. And, the employer is a little bit more back in control now.
Well, we used to say the millennials are entitled, which, by the way, some of them probably still are. By the way, so are boomers, just saying. So are, what's your generation?
Millennial.
Oh, millennial. And then Gen Zs, they're for sure entitled, but that's about ready to get ripped out from them. I mean, and that's what happens. What happens is things get real, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, I'm out of cash."
Mm-hmm.
Maybe things aren't as good as they were, and that's all it is. It's just life. It's experience.
It is. But you have to look at, it's interesting to see some of the things that the Trump administration is currently doing to tackle some of this affordability and, and things that they've proposed or things that, we think as far as on the housing front. Now, we were watching Sunday Morning yesterday, and Trump is already looking at taking tariffs off certain food like beef, bananas, coffee. And the reason he's doing that is that tariffs make things more expensive. So he's, even though he said they didn't, but now he's taken the tariffs off because they do. And so anyways, he's doing that because people need to be able to afford food. Food's a big one because every time you go to the grocery store, which is at least once, if not twice a week, you are reminded how expensive food is, right? I am even. But if you're paycheck to paycheck, you're definitely reminded of it. And so to give people relief on food is huge.
Yeah, it's food. One of I guess a bright spot is housing. Not necessarily the single family housing, because single family housing, last I looked, we were still well over 400 on the average for the nation. And rates haven't really come down that much. So it's really not that affordable there. However, on the rent side, it's a renter's market right now. Like, there's just so much supply that hit the market that it just disrupted the markets, and that's good, because if you're a renter, I looked the other day, it's 38% cheaper to rent than buy right now nationally. Of course, it's different in every city, but that's a good thing, because people can get a month free, 2 months free in many, many markets right now, and that's a 20-30% discount.
It is, but you also have to think too that somebody's got to come expand Section 8 essentially, or give some kind of vouchers to middle class families, and we're seeing this in parts of Michigan actually, where they've expanded housing vouchers to, I think you can make $120,000 a year as a family. Because people do need help on the rent side. And a lot of people could say, well, why don't you just cap the landlords on how much they can charge for rent? But when you do that, then you don't have any new apartments, right?
But if you
don't
cap
have new housing.
Cap my expenses, and I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Like, if you cap my expenses and cap my income, then that makes sense. But you can't just do one.
Right, because then people aren't going to build, right? And so you need people to build because you need places for people to live. And a lot of it, the red tape of building and the cost of building. So, I was just listening to something the other day about the Palisades fire and how, only 5% of those homes have been restarted so far. But one of the big reasons is all the red tape that they have makes it too expensive to rebuild. If you have too many regulations and it's too expensive, then people aren't going to want to build.
Of course. What do you think a builder goes through?
Exactly.
Like, come on, guys. Like, this is like, finally it came out of Wall Street, and what Main Street's now seeing it. This is exactly what we deal with every day. It's you guys. We would build as cheap as we could. I don't think people realize that. Like, if I could, I would build 1,000 plus affordable homes. 1,000%, I would do that with no profit. I would literally do it for hardly any profit. I can't. I can't, because of what you're talking about, like the red tape, the bureaucracy. It's a mess, and interest rates are high too, right? Because I'm going to need a loan to do that. But people would deliver affordable housing if they could. And
something that we're seeing, like a lot of states doing, I know we have a deal like this in Texas, is that giving tax credits to landlords that build part of the homes affordable. So if you build a 300 unit, apartment building, if you do 20% of the homes that they stay quote unquote affordable, then you do get some kind of tax credit. So that's something that, we might see more of, because, it sounds great. Like Mandani wants to build a bunch of free units with it, but it's more expensive for the state to build apartment units. We saw that in California, when it was it was at $1 million.
They completely messed it up.
Yeah, it was
just
insane.
Google how California tried to do affordable housing, and it's a flipping joke.
Well, it's really expensive, right? It doesn't make sense.
But it was payoffs. It was politician payoffs.
Yep.
That drove the prices up. Just look, there's multiple articles on the corruption around that. The city should be a private. The city should offer the credits, or the state, and the private person should do it, and they should be oversight. There should be some oversight. But the problem is the city can't be trusted with building housing.
There's a lot of process to building, and it's just, you see it. I mean, look at California. You see it. They don't get anything done because they take forever. And then everyone's getting paid off, and then they're throwing in money for themselves, and there's just a bunch of red tape, and it just doesn't work. Plus, then once you build them, you have to manage them, right? So we saw that in Chicago in the projects is, it's so dangerous there. They actually rip part of it down because you actually have to manage the property too, and the government's not good at
There's
that either.
that.
I mean, imagine the Postal Service managing a property and all the things that we deal with as landlords on a property. You have to be proactive to keep it nice where people actually want to live and it to be safe.
Right. Like when FedEx and UPS came out, which are private companies now, public, of course. But what it did is it made the post office better.
Mm-hmm.
I watched it.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody was like, there was all this thing of going postal, right? I mean, it was a mess. Well, just, so the more people doing the same thing delivers better service, right? So, and that's the issue. It's by the way, LIHTC or low income tax credits are something that's been around a long time. We've done them, and they're extremely good for the economy, right? They're just hard to get. There's a process, just like the low income HUD, housing and urban development deals as well. There's a number of programs there, but again, you're dealing with the government to try to build something, and but when they're done. I know plenty of people doing these. When they're done, they're really, really good deals, and the developer typically sells off the tax credits. That's actually the interesting piece. So we can get a 300-unit tax credit, let's say, for building a 300-unit project. There's buyers out there for that to offset their tax.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So they'll buy it. Like if on the open market, those tax credits are worth something to somebody. They do this in energy too. Carbon credits and these different kinds of credits, but they're sellable. If you can get that kind of a contract. On the other side of it, you have to reserve a piece of your property, whatever it is, 20%, 30%, 40%, let's say, to the. I think it was last I looked, it was like 80% of the median income that can actually rent in part of it. So there's a process. Some of it's market rate and some of it isn't. But either way, the numbers can work.
Yeah. And so, moving forward, they're going to have to help, people with some of this stuff. And the other big ones are healthcare, which, you're having that big battle right now between Democrats and Republicans and Obamacare and funding it and not. And I know even in Arizona, we just passed Proposition 409 to basically give to the hospitals in order to, fund our healthcare system.
Well, I think we need to wind the clock back because I've been an employer in Arizona for 25 years. And there was a time where my insurance rates were reasonable for my employees. Then, and by the way, I'm not throwing stones at Obama, but when Obamacare came, a lot of those insurance companies pulled out of the state.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we can't do this. And so what happened was it went from like 26 or 28, I can't remember the number, down to 2, and then it went to 1. So basically had one person that was doing it. And the prices went way up. And so, I'm not an insurance person, but I'm just telling you that happened to me. And so therefore, my policy and my premiums for my employees went way up, which, by the way, I'm funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so something has to change there. It's not a Trump issue. It's not even a Biden issue. It's been going on for a while.
Yeah. Well, and then the last, thing that people have, and a lot of people probably dealing with this now that are listening, is daycare. 4 years of daycare is almost $150,000 at this point.
That's insane. Think about that. What that does is just pulls people out of the workforce. So, if, would you say 5 years?
Yeah, 5 years. I think 4 or 5 years of daycare was $150,000.
So, okay. So that's 30, 40 grand a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. That's a huge number. So
pre-tax.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So you have to be making 50, 60, 70,000 just to break even.
Right.
Right. So so families are probably making the decision, well, why would I go to work every day for 50 grand? Only to basically fund daycare.
But that's also if you only have one kid. Like most people have 2 or 3 kids.
Yeah. But it's a net, and you would be better off just being at home with a kid.
Mhm.
and figuring that out.
Well, it's about, if you can stay at home, a lot of people probably would want to, but as you can see with these affordability issues, that's not necessarily, an option for one person to work when all these expenses have went up this much.
But that one particularly, if somebody stays home, you're either working full time and paying it, and you're net, or you're at home and you're saving it. So you have to look at that. It's like a $40,000-$50,000 a year savings by staying home.
So, one of the options that they have floated is giving tax credits for companies to offer daycare. But there's a big expense to running a daycare, and there's a lot of liability to running a daycare. So I think that's kind of part of the problem, right?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's the same thing. Like I've dabbled around with assisted care. So I know it's not childcare, but it's care. And so care, when you start bringing in nurses and doctors and people overseeing somebody else, there's serious insurance and regulations, which there should be, and oversight around that, and massive liability. Let's say a senior falls, or a kid falls, right? The reality is everybody, especially today, they're like, that's your fault. So and so I would say that's probably not going to work.
Yeah, I just think it's too much. And I even think that's why you really haven't seen even your big companies do it, to my knowledge. Like, you haven't seen Amazon or anybody step up to that. Now, once again, it comes down to this red tape, though, because like back when I was younger, daycare wasn't expensive. The girl across the street from me, she ran a daycare and watched 7 kids in her house, and her husband worked, and it was a way she could stay at home with her 2 kids. But the point is now there's so much red tape. You have to be licensed as a daycare, and you have to have a separate facility, and once again, all this red tape makes things very expensive because there's a limited supply and demand. If there was more daycares, or if there was credit for people starting daycares, or if their red tape was removed to an extent where people could watch kids in their house again without, with legally, right?
There is, however, I think, you gotta, there's a comfort when there's a certain process that the daycare has to go through, from an outsider, right? Like the licensing, and obviously the criminal credit background checks and the CPR, and there are things that absolutely positively, I think that if I was going to drop my kid off, those are things that you would ask. And so I get that piece, right? But to your point, the liability and the excessive regulations, turn people off. But for the basic stuff, I mean, if you're going to be a lifeguard, there's a certain process of things that you have to go to with certifications. I love that. Right? And so that's probably where it should hang out, right in there somewhere. But people don't do it because of the excess.
Yeah, and it's really too hard on, and I know that once again, Mom Donnie in New York is talking about free daycare, but like I said, the governor's like, well, there's no money for that. I mean, that would be very expensive. Plus, dropping your kids off at a free daycare, what is the quality of that daycare too? You'd have to think about that. So right now, most homeowners are locked into 2 to 3% mortgages. They can't afford to sell, and buyers can't afford to buy. So until we address that gap, then the market is going to stay frozen. And today we're going to discuss some options the Trump administration has floated around, and why those may or may not work, and which one we think is the most likely to be enacted.
Well, the first thing is, I don't think in 26 we're going to see rates even close to where people are going to want to refinance,
right?
Significantly, right?
Or sell.
Yeah, I mean 26, potentially even 27. I know, Trump wants this, right? And he's going to have his new Fed chair in there in May. But the reality is, if we start to see this creep up in unemployment, and inflation's ticking up too. So employment's going up and inflation's going up. That's not what the Fed wants. They want.
Are you saying employment's going up?
Employment's gone up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that could be holiday though too. We're in the holiday season.
That's true. I guess Q1 we'll be able to see, but they're even talking about not doing rate increases in
Rate decrease.
or they're even talking about not doing rate decreases in December, right? At this next Fed meeting. And why would they be talking about that now? For the two things I just mentioned. And so they're going to be looking at this completely independent of what the president wants. They have to be. And by the way, there's how many, Jerry? There's 13 Fed governors? Yeah. I think 13 Fed governors, right? So the chair is important, but it's a vote, right? Like everybody forgets it's a vote. So I don't know. I think you're going to see flat, maybe a little bit of relief, perhaps, through next year. Which basically just makes your issue worse.
Yeah. And, so I think that is why now I think Trump realizes that while he can get interest rates down a little bit, he probably can't do anything super dramatic like he wants to. So he's looking at additional options for people and to get this market moving. Because you really have two issues. You have sellers that can't sell because going from their 3% mortgage on their $500,000 house to a 7% mortgage on a $600,000 house.
Or even 5. I mean, just even if they bought the same house.
Right. And then you also have, boomers saying, why would I sell? Because you have that, a tax on them if their property has went up more than $250,000 or $500,000, which a lot of them have. And also why, like my parents could sell their house and downgrade, but they're kind of doing fine. So they don't really need to. Because
my mom's the same. Like when you don't have a payment or it's really low.
Yeah.
Like, why would you it's like having a car that you're good with, like has low miles and your payment's low or you don't even have one. Like, I mean, that's the situation people are in.
Well, my parents have been in the house 25 years. They know all their neighbors. Like, why would they sell and move to a smaller house? Like, they lose that community that they have and all of that, right?
Good point. So the community is rarely talked about.
Yeah, and I do. I think that's why, so you have this stagnation where it's like boomers don't need to sell and people that would normally sell and upgrade their home can't. And so Trump is trying to figure out a way. And the only real way besides, doing something about it is for rates to go back down to like 5% or below for then people to consider moving. But I mean, we're far off from, I think rates right now are like 6.3.
So we're way better 5. Like, let's just be clear. Even if it goes to 5, that's not low enough.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It probably needs to go to 4 realistically.
Right. 4 is really what's going to unlock everything.
Yeah, which is incredibly low. So Trump's coming up with these ideas. So one of them that was just talked about is portable mortgages. And portable mortgages would to say, okay, you have a $500,000 house and a $400,000 mortgage at 3%. So you can take that $400,000 mortgage and buy a $600,000 house and just have like another loan on the additional, $200,000 that might be at 6%, but the majority of your loan would then stay where you're at now at, 3.5% or whatever.
Yeah. Now you guys probably know on the commercial side of the equation, there's assumable mortgage.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. But this is very similar to that.
It is, but we are going to get into it because it is slightly different.
It is, but whether you can transfer it or somebody else can assume it, either way. What you're really doing is you're locking in an old loan.
Yeah, you're taking it with you.
Yeah, that's what that means. So, and that's it's an interesting idea.
About 61% of all U.S. mortgages were originated between 20 and 22 at rates below 4%. One of the issues, though, that the banks aren't going to like about this is they actually want people out of these products. It doesn't help them that people are in a 3.5% loan. So they are going to be resistant in letting people move that to another loan.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen. First of all, the banks have to agree.
Right.
The person that's loaning the money.
Right. They have to agree that, okay, well, we're going to let all these people take these loans in the hopes that maybe, more first-time buyers or whatever, new loans can be originated at these new loan prices. But the other issue with that is the secondary mortgage market. And the reason with that is that 70% of mortgages are held with Fannie and Freddie in mortgage-backed securities. And the borrowers took money out on these loans. Like there's investors into this market, right? So they took money out on the loan knowing that it was tied to this property and knowing that they make their money too when it sells, right? And so for them, you have contracts with these investors that you can't necessarily just bypass and change the rules to. It would change the whole MBS market.
So that's why I kind of went to the assumable, which I know we're going to be talking about. But the assumable stays with the asset. And that way, so this is that's why I don't know whether this is politicking or what, but the homeowner is not in control of the loan.
Mm-hmm.
They owe it. They've signed on it, but they in no way can decide where it goes.
Yeah, and then this one is probably pretty unlikely because of that. Also, you have your investor models, right? Like most loans are kept I think it's on average of 12 years, and then they are refinanced or, paid off on a sell. So that is kind of ruining the investor model for their returns too, because now you're allowing someone to move it, which is going to kind of double that.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's why the loan stays on the asset, and then the asset performs or it doesn't. When you can move it around, like imagine me taking my car loan if I had one and just moving it to another car.
Right.
Right. And they're like, what? Chase, let's say it's with Chase or Bank of America. They're not going to allow that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Because you don't know what the car you're getting, the age of the car. You just don't know anything about it.
Right. So that's essentially what we're dealing with. That's why I don't think that has a chance. And you know what?
So let's talk about assumable mortgages, because this is the other thing. It's a product that we already have, and so the mortgage would then stay with the property. So if you had a 4% mortgage, you could sell your home with that 4% mortgage on the loan you already have. And then the other person buying it just needs to qualify for the difference. Now, we do already have this in our loan products only for FHA and VA loans, though. We don't have this for conventional loans. And the thing now is the buyer has to bring the rest of the cash to the table. So if you get a $400,000 loan and you're assuming it and the property is $600,000, you would actually have to bring $200,000 in cash in order to assume that loan. So right now, 65% of U.S. mortgages are conventional. So that would rule out all of those right now are not qualified for assumable. And as the ones that are assumable are about 28% of the market.
Yeah, I've done a lot of these, and mostly on the commercial, and they're awesome. Like right now, for example, there are loans out there on deals where they might be for sale, where they're at like 3.5%. Mm-hmm. So they get a lot of attention, right? And you're right, you have to come up with the cash, mm-hmm. But there's nothing wrong with low leverage.
But I think that the biggest thing is you still have to consider the investor. So in the banks too, because now everyone is stuck in these 2 and 3% mortgages. And, we always talk about people wanting to invest in mortgage-backed securities. Well, if we just rewrite the laws and we just say, okay, well, we're just going to let everybody assume all of these loans, which were not assumable before.
So one of the things that's important to understand is even in the assumable market, because I've done a lot of these, if you're going to assume a loan, let's say you have a loan, Danille, and you're the seller of something and you have a great loan. And I'm like, I want to buy that property because I want to assume the loan. Also, I like the property. Well, the lender, not you, is going to look at me and they're going to go, can this person run this property? Can they, can they afford to own it? They're going to run through the same kinds of things. So the assumable process is not unlike a new loan. Mm-hmm. And so, again, there's complications there. There's not. I actually do like this. I like the fact that a loan can stay on a property. Like you have a condo right now that's at 2.6 or something.
2.8, yeah.
2.8%. If you just put that out on the internet, said I have a condo that's 2.8%, you can step into that payment, and people have cash. They'll like that. Mm-hmm. That's But then again, your lender has to approve the new buyer, period. So they're not portable. The person that got the loan does not have any control over the loan.
But you do have to remember that if you make loans assumable, that's going to remove refinance income unless you
for sure.
charge that. I mean, you could charge that, though, on the sale or something like that.
Yep.
The biggest thing I think is there's a legal structure around this. So the Garn-Strait-Germain Act in 1982 allows lenders to enforce a due on sale clause.
Did you ChatGPT that?
I didn't. I looked it up.
Oh, my gosh.
But anyways, that would require Congress. So Congress is going to have to pass this. And right now we have a very, bipartisan, doesn't want to agree on anything kind of Congress, because it would help the housing market, which in effect would then help the real estate market, which would help Trump look better and, people be happier. So, this is a big hurdle because Congress has to be involved here. There's no way they can't be involved because of that law that was passed. And so he would need congressional approval to do this. And I just don't think with our legal system right now, we're going to get that.
Well, I don't know. All I know is even if it does get passed, even if they go through all that, the lender still decides who gets to assume it.
Right.
So
yeah, that one would be tough. And that's why, which everyone hates this one, but that's why let's talk about 50-year mortgages, because this is the most likely outcome, whether you like it or not, because you don't need congressional approval. The banks already have a very similar product, with the 30-year. And there's Canada does this, Japan does this, like other countries already do a 50-year mortgage. So it just seems like this is probably the easiest option and the most likely one.
Yeah. And I don't mind this one. I don't love it. But if it lowers payments and gets people into a hard asset, then I think that's good.
Well, and, you have to look at, how Canada does it is probably the most likely, because banks aren't going to want to lock in an interest rate for 50 years either. So how Canada does it is every 5 years, the rate resets, basically. So it's basically an adjustable rate mortgage on a 50-year basis. And you don't have to stay in that product. Yeah. You can move from that product. But that's probably the most likely option.
One of the guys on our mastermind, Marcin, we've had him on the channel before. He sent me an article after he listened to our podcast about the 50-year mortgage. He said, we have these in Canada. 40 and 50 years, and they do reset every 5, though.
So Japan's is a little different. I don't see us doing that one. It's a set term for the long term, and it's generational, so your kids can take it over. And, it's like a family mortgage system, which is great, but their economy is very slow, and it's just less likely. But
not a bad idea, though. I mean, if you think about it, for example, like if your parents had something really long and they could give you the house and it had a low mortgage payment on it, that's not such a bad thing.
No, it's not. It's a lose for the banks. And so our banks are,
Yes, finally. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
So, the way our banks work is, they want to obviously make money and people are invested in it. Now,
Bingo.
I think that there's some danger in this in general, because I think, we're the only country in the world, or one of the only ones, that has that fixed 30-year rate that does not change. I think if you start introducing this on the bank,
they can get out. We can get away.
They can kind of get away from that 30-year fixed and move into more of a Canadian model where it's 50 years or maybe, and you can do 30 and you can do 15, but it resets every 5 years. Because I think that's where we're going to eventually end up anyways. And I think that this is a way the banks could, approve that. Yeah.
And not a bad conspiracy theory.
Yeah, let's just see.
But it is an interesting, I don't know if you guys realize how amazing that 30-year mortgage is in the United States. It's very, very unique to be able to have. Danille, if she doesn't sell that condo, which she's going to, by the way, that's at 2.8%. Like you could be in your 70s, it'd still be 2.8%. No, maybe not 70s. Yeah.
70s. Yeah. Well, but here's the thing, though, is that I do think, though, that this is going to open up that door, because the banks are losing money on those 30-year fixed products. I mean, that is not a win for the bank. Oh. And that's why they don't want them portable and they don't want them assumable, because it doesn't help them, because they're paying more for their money.
Especially with inflation, guys.
Yeah.
Like 2.8 is less than inflation.
I know.
Is it inflation right around that? 2.9 or something?
Truthfully, those of you that have a super low mortgage, like,
keep it,
like, deal with it. Like, my brother has one, just like, even if you don't have
throw a renter in
throw a
there,
renter in there.
let somebody else pay it off. If not you, you have to stay there. Trust me, guys, it's free money.
You're gonna regret selling that later. The reason I'm selling mine is I only have a very small loan on the property, so it's not. I wish I would have bought it with a whole 2%.
She wants cash.
But I only have $120,000 mortgaged on a $350,000 project. So, and plus the HOA is going up. So there's just all these things. But if you own a home and you have a low rate and you have a big mortgage on it, like,
my advice
don't pay it off quickly. Like, put your money elsewhere and keep it. And if you're gonna change houses, then rent it. Like, it's such a valuable asset. You're gonna regret getting rid of that mortgage.
Yeah, hold on to that thing.
Yep. No matter what your realtor tells you about selling.
Yeah, no kidding. Don't do it. Don't do it.
All right, you guys. Well, thanks, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.